What in God's name is that from Thorin?
If we look at the past of the role of the in-game leader in Counter-Strike, the present of the role and how it's evolving, and anticipate, extrapolate, compare in traditional sports a potential trajectory for where it's headed in the future, you will see that this role has been changing, morphing over time, and actually the general trend is for less and less overall power and authority to lie with this individual and responsibilities, and those responsibilities and powers to be delegated elsewhere within the organization, most notably outside of the game, not an individual who plays on the field in the starting lineup, as it were. So the past of the role of the in-game leader was there were no coaches for most of the time in CS 1.6 and early CSGO. There were managers. These were people who typically just took care of logistics, of simple man management of, let's book the hotels and make sure people know what hotel they're in. Let's book the flights and make sure people catch those flights and go with them if they don't know what they're doing and they're too young. Let's get food and water for people and make sure they're up on time and get to the event. At most, you might get some say in managing the emotional level of a player or befriending a player so he has someone on the road he can talk to and someone who isn't a teammate that he can express frustrations to, or someone he can go through to get help from his organization or to deal with his organization who might be up here as business people who aren't playing anymore and he's just a 16-year-old kid who's good at the game. But then you look at the present of the role and the in-game leader had up until recently been taking on all of the aspects of coaching, general managing, man management, sports psychology. All these aspects basically were just part and parcel of being an in-game leader. You run the team, it's your team, you decide who's on the team, how you practice, whether this guy gets kicked, what role he's used in, what he gets to, how they talk with their teammates and resolve differences. Basically, because we didn't have coaches in that traditional sense, and we later got some coaches who started to do more in the game, it all just fell on the in-game leader's shoulders. And even though technically in-game leader just means you're the guy who calls the tactic, you're the one who does the basic leadership, we give these guys every responsibility there was. And some of them were legends and could cope with it and could deal with it. Even then, nearly always, it was the case that they each had their own flaws, even though they had amazing successes. And some of them were such incredible people, the Khans, Aves of the world, Godby, that they could take on a lot of these burdens, but didn't mean that they were successful in all areas. So when you look at the present of the role, you see coaches. You see guys who, some of them are there for man management. They're there to make sure egos don't get out of control like Zeus, like Robban. Some of them are there tactical coaches. Someone like Zeus from Team Liquid has now taken on some of that role more. Some of them obviously had been tacticians themselves, both when they were players or before the coaching rule changed. So they actually could talk during all the freeze time, etc. And they were giving the tactical input. They were the leader in that sense. They weren't the in-game leader because they were in the game, but they were the leader in the sense that a Pronax like a Zeus of Na'Vi would be right now because they're playing and they're inside the game. Now, if Counter-Strike and esports becomes like a big traditional sport, I personally think we will see that coaching rule reverted. Like the reason it was implemented, which was to like make it fairer, more of an even playing field for smaller orgs, that doesn't make sense for where we're at the top professional level now. Everyone has coaches, everyone would benefit. In fact, I think they've made those kind of special in-game leaders I'm talking about before, the Glaives and these types of characters, too overpowered because they have all these extra skill sets, because you won't allow a coach to also interact in the game, at least in terms of comms, with the players that are playing the match right now. The future for me is that just like in the NFL, yeah, you have your coach and he coaches your practices and decides to some degree who's in the team and how they're used. But more importantly, you also have other people. You have your analysts. So in the NFL, you have your coach, you have your offensive coordinator, you have your quarterback. We're not going to talk about defense, we're talking about the quarterback's role here. These people all do something different. The coach oftentimes is calling the plays. He's had you practice specific players, drill specific players. He has a different view to the quarterback. He's often calling the plays that are being made. Now, yes, the quarterback, especially if he's a very, very good quarterback or he's experienced, he can change some of the players. He might have options as to what he does within the system. He can come to the line of scrimmage, see that the defense is altering and he can throw a fake in there or do a different move or even sometimes come up with something impromptu. That's something that, for example, Peyton Manning of the Colts and the Broncos was famously extremely good at, and using kind of that hurry-up offense. But generally, it's the coach who's calling a lot of the plays. That's why the relationship between a Sean Payton and Drew Brees is so important. These kinds of individuals, Belichick and Brady, etc., these guys get to have input in what's done there. The quarterback isn't the one always making the play, always making the call. I think it'll become more like that in Counter-Strike. And so the key thing for me is that you'll have the coach take over more of the bigger tactical planning, even take over some of the calling. In doing so, an in-game leader will still have input. The better the in-game leader, the more experienced the in-game leader, the guy who's having a better game, he will certainly be able to make optional calls. He'll be able to do something mid-round. He'll be able to improvise at times. That will be the evolution of the in-game leader role. It'll be more akin to what a very good quarterback is now, and how much control you have depends on what coach you have and what quarterback you have. If you have a low-level quarterback but good enough for the NFL, you're going to need an amazing tactical guy who can make up for some of that. If you have a Peyton Manning, your offensive coordinator and your coach aren't going to have as much direct impact. They're going to be more like suggesting things, and he's the one going to be pulling the trigger on what you do particularly. Because one of the things, okay, a detail I found out recently, which shows me as well that this would be a great move, is that supposedly this current Astralis lineup, one of the reasons as to why Glaive has elevated his individual fragging so much, is that when they are practicing at the refresh offices, in scrims, Sonic is the one doing the in-game leading. He's calling. He's not in the game, it's just a term. He's the one doing the tactical calling. He's calling from the playbook he's designed, he's helped, and Glaive's had his input on and helped with as well. And then Glaive in the scrims is, at least in some of the scrims, is just playing. And so he's practicing within the same tactic and it's getting called, but he's getting to practice like he would as an individual player and keep his aim at a high level and his skills at a high level. And then when he comes to the game, he takes over because the coaching will change and he calls the strats. So it's not the same as the old Glaive in the same way as it was when he first came to Astralis or back in his Western Wolves days. Now that's obviously an amazing evolution. It's very, very intelligent, and you can see from the results, it seemingly has had a big impact on the team. So I could see that being something else that becomes implemented, because like I'm saying, eventually I see it being the case that that would just be the de facto way it runs anyway in an official match if they revert the old coaching rule changes. I also think that it's still going to be a very, very important role, the in-game leader, just as in terms of players on the field, the quarterback is the most important overall, by and large, in terms of general impact. But just as the quarterback isn't the be-all, end-all of a football team, just as it's not the case that you have to have the best quarterback to win or to be the best team, likewise, you will not have to have the best in-game leader to win. At the moment, I personally do think at the moment, you have to have one of the elite in-game leaders to have a chance to win in current Counter-Strike. You just don't see teams at the extreme top who have average to bad in-game leaders currently. Like, sure, there are exceptions, Mouse Sports, Team Liquid. Some of these guys don't have the same tenure as in-game leaders, but typically you look at the top 10, it's filled with legendary in-game leaders from past games, 1.6 and Source, or CSGO directly itself. So I still think it's a very, very important role, and it will be even in this world, I'm imagining, if we ever get there. But it just won't be the all-encompassing role that it can seem like at the moment, especially because, as I said, they're also doing external things like recruit players, manage people's egos, try and actually develop a player. These are all things that coaching infrastructure in some capacity will take over. Then there's going to be a world in which, because you're going to have someone from the organization who doesn't necessarily get fired in the same way as an in-game leader might be, because he's going to be the one helping to decide this more consistent identity, you're going to get all these upside benefits that normally would disappear when the in-game leader gets fired or leaves to another team. You can now build up a specific type of team culture, the way that you want to be thought of, the core values that are the most important to you and your team, and how you want your team to be perceived in its legacy. You can replace in-game leaders when they're not playing very well and still play Astralis Counter-Strike, Na'Vi Counter-Strike, Mouse Sports Counter-Strike, and still have the same flavor of team, even though you've got different players in there. That's something that'll be possible. You'll be able to replace star players and role players in a much more efficient and effective manner, because you'll have this culture there, because you'll have a way of practicing, because you'll know what type of player you want to get and what pieces to put with each other. And there won't, because of the coaching aspect, be as much of the personal petty politics of like, well, I just don't like this guy, or he was rude to me that one time. That's not going to be as big of a deal. The players are going to play, the coaches are going to coach. Then there's also going to be the factor that when you know the culture you want and your identity, you're also going to know which players not to take, which guy not to take a gamble on just because you haven't had a result recently and he's a skilled player and maybe he could help you win a couple of tournaments. You're going to take people who fit the long-term trajectory of this year, next year and the future to build a stronger and stronger squad over time that can be the best in the future, as well as hopefully in the short term soon. So it's been a role that I always thought they gave too much responsibility to the in-game leader, understandably, and the best in-game leaders embraced that and was so incredible. They excelled it out in areas that were quite frankly beyond the Call of Duty. But I do think it's the case that when you have the money, the infrastructure, and the people who've done these roles, this will be something where you will delegate some of these responsibilities. You'll have a structure, a system, and a general team culture and identity, and it'll go beyond the player in the same way as you can have an amazing team system in the NFL, and you can replace the quarterback, and you could still have a similar style of team, a similar brand of American football, and be very successful in the same way. And also, you do not need the best quarterback to win in the NFL. And as a result, if you get an amazing infrastructure, you won't need the best in-game leader to win in Counter-Strike. This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.